early on that we had access probably to the largest population of people who had transverse myelitis. And now, as it turns out, transverse myelitis, ADEM, Devix, and optic neuritis. We also wanted to begin to formulate sufficient background information about the neuroimmunologic diseases to be able to proceed with a more closed-ended, longitudinal, and scientific study. The reality of this situation was that when we began this research, I didn't know what neuroimmunologic meant. The study was co-directed by Jesse Danninger and myself. Jesse has a master's degree in accounting, is really an exceptional researcher. My background is cultural anthropology, and my specializations are Native American, psychological anthropology, and culture change. So we brought a very interesting perspective to this medical research. To do it like a good cultural anthropologist, I moved in with a woman who has transverse myelitis, and I've lived with her for 10 years, and I've studied her every behavior. And she's fascinating. And she's beautiful. The survey was designed in 1996. At the time, we had fewer than 200 members and had a very limited understanding of transverse myelitis. We used an open-ended survey to collect the information because we had such limited understanding, and we wanted to fill in this understanding about patient experiences. We began to administer the survey in January 1997. It was mailed out with our first newsletter to our 187 members. Since then, it has been mailed to more than 5,000 people from all around the world. When we get a new member to the association, they get mailed a membership packet, and that survey was included with the membership packet. So they were able to fill out the open-ended questions, and they mailed those back to me. Or Jim Lubin had the survey posted on our website, and they were able to fill it out electronically and return it to us electronically, although the vast majority of people returned it to us longhand. The survey consisted of 32 questions along with the person's contact information, but when you include the subparts of the questions, there were over 60 questions in the survey. The database was finally closed in May of this year, so the administration process for this survey went on for 7.5 years. 815 people completed and returned the survey, all are members of the TMA. And so we are able to contact all of these people, which is really nice. It comes out to about 16% as a response rate, although it's probably can be looked at as significantly higher than 20% because not all of the 5,000 members of the Transverse Myelitis Association have TM. We also have medical professionals in our membership. So the response rate was probably a little over 20%, which is really probably pretty exceptional when you consider that we never did any callbacks to talk to people about filling this out. In filling out the survey, some respondents referred to their medical records, and some, in fact, attached their medical records to the survey. But I would say that most people who responded from memory, and so the responses really reflect more experiential and anecdotal information as opposed to the kind of information that would be in a medical report or from a first-hand physician examination. All of the survey responses were entered into an Excel spreadsheet verbatim. Jesse and I did this data entry for 7 years, and Michelle Miller, Stephen's wife, is Michelle in here? I don't see her. Michelle has been working on the survey in the last year to enter the last surveys that have come in. The data represents literally thousands and thousands of pages of information. I have to say, all the people who have worked on this research have donated their time and expertise to this. The entire survey was administered, coded, and analyzed at absolutely no cost, and we received no financial support for doing this, like everything else we do in the association. And I suppose you might look at this as you get what you pay for, too. We began the process of developing categories for coding in early 2003. That process took us over a year to complete. We coded the open-ended question. By coding the open-ended questions, this allowed us to perform quantitative analysis from qualitative information. This was a unique piece of research in that the respondents were not guided in their particular response. They were able to define their responses in their own words. And we found this approach particularly interesting and important when people describe their symptoms. We have over 40 symptom categories for these questions, and one symptom question took me 3 months to develop the categories for, because the answers are really quite extensive. We began to code the open-ended responses, and we have just completed that process. And what I'm going to present to you this morning here are some very, very preliminary results, because we've just begun to do the analysis. As you can see, there is a large disparity in the number of females as opposed to males in our response, and I'm going to guess that some of this is response bias. I could probably wax philosophic about the differences between men and women for about 3 hours here. Just think of the on and off switch yesterday from Dr. Foley's presentation. I'm going to guess that some of this is response bias from women perhaps responding to surveys more disproportionately higher than men, and maybe women joining support groups may be disproportionately higher than men, but there's certainly a disparity and this may reflect some difference between males and females. Our data as far as age of onset, the largest number of our respondents are between 41 and 50 years old. Of the 811 people who responded to this question, 45% were between 31 and 50 years old. Now there is, this is a little bit deceiving because the age intervals are not totally uniform, because we were interested in looking at the younger ages to see whether there were spikes in the ages earlier than 10 years. So it is a little bit deceiving. There were 20 children who got TM who were 2 years old and younger. One of the issues that I think, Doug, you guys have looked at this, and I thought this was really interesting. We looked at the season of onset. Of the 815 respondents, 771 of them included a month when they provided us with what was the date of their onset. In fact, for some people, they included a specific date and a time of day of their onset. And so we just took the months, we divided them into the seasons, and you can see we saw absolutely no difference in seasonal onset, which was very surprising to me because my telephone seems to ring so much more frequently in the fall and the winter as opposed to the spring and summer that this was really shocking to me. One of the questions we asked was, what was your initial diagnosis? Actually, we asked people, what was your initial diagnosis? What is your current diagnosis? And what was the period of time between your initial and your current diagnosis? And we're still analyzing the time interval piece of this. As you can see, a little more than half got a diagnosis of TM, 8% Guillain-Barré, 8% MS, 32%, no, I'm looking at the frequency, the numbers here. It's 4% were diagnosed with some structural problem. 39 or 5% received no diagnosis. And then there were 122 people, or 15%, who fell out into 25 other diagnostic categories. The ones that had more than 10 respondents were 17, a spinal tumor, 14, a spinal stroke, and 13, hysterical paralysis, whatever that may be. For current diagnosis, almost 90% reported that their current diagnosis was TM. 9 people reported MS. 8 people reported TM with possible MS, and so on down the line. 195 people identified a location of their lesions but didn't say they had TM, and we're going to go back and look at those people, and the number is going to end up being greater than 90% because 195 of these people probably reported somewhere else on this survey that they have transverse myelitis. They just didn't report it in answer to this question. You give people an open-ended survey and they do whatever they want with it. We also looked at location of lesions, and this one was also really surprising to me because of what we've heard in terms of a preponderance of attacks in the thoracic region. As you can see, the mode here is C6, which this to me looked much more in the cervical area than I was expecting. Now, this is the location of lesion, and for those respondents who identified multiple locations, they're represented more than once on this diagram. Hopefully that made sense. We also looked at whether they had cold or flu symptoms before the onset of TM. 793 people responded to this question, and 37% said that their TM onset was preceded by cold or flu symptoms. 75% of our respondents said that they received steroids for their treatment, and interestingly enough, and this was also a surprise to me, 39% of them received those within 24 hours of onset, and 50% of those received steroids within 48 hours of onset, which I thought, given just my anecdotal experience, was fairly positive. The 50% who didn't is not very positive, and some of those people received steroids. Is when we do the analysis here, we're going to see that a very large percentage of these people received steroids way after their inflammatory attack was resolved. We looked at how many people experienced pain, some type of pain, and we haven't yet parsed this out from neuropathic to skeletal muscular pain, but just a general category of pain, and there were 77%. Then what we did was we took a look at how many experienced pain by age, and I have for years deluded myself into thinking that young children don't experience pain from TM, so I have to say this was a total bummer for me. Obviously, there are very young children who experience pain with transverse myelitis. Oh, yeah. I mean, if you think back to the numbers of children that we had in those age groups, they were small numbers for those younger ages, too. We asked people to identify the different therapies that were used in their treatment of transverse myelitis and their symptoms of TM. And we had 40 different symptom categories, and we just pulled out a couple to look at for our presentation today. And as you can see, 393 people got physical therapy. I picked hydrotherapy because I've heard so much positive experience from people about their getting therapy in the water, and I just wanted to take a look at that. These just picked out a few to take a look at. 60 people said that they received no therapies at all. And then we asked them to identify of the therapies that they had received, which did they find beneficial, and this is the result from that question. And again, 63 people said that nothing was beneficial for them. 100 people said the steroids were beneficial for them. And 268 said their physical therapy was beneficial. So where do we go from here? Well, I'm going to go home and take a nap when this is over. And then when I wake up, we're going to finish the analysis of the survey. We asked three very important questions about the symptoms. What were their symptoms at onset? What were their most severe symptoms, and when did they experience those? How far after onset were their most severe symptoms? And what are their current symptoms? And as I said, there's 40 different symptom categories that we have for those. We also asked the respondent to describe their recovery during the first, second, third, and fourth 6-month periods from onset, and also post 2 years. And we coded this question across all 40 symptom categories. We coded those as either they experienced improvement, there was no change, or there was a worsening in that symptom during each of those periods. And we believe that we have some fairly compelling questions to look at in regards to those issues, such as, was there a relationship between the administration of steroids and the nature and course of the recovery? Was there a relationship between how quickly the steroids were administered and the nature and course of recovery? Was there a relationship between getting physical therapy and their recovery? And was there some relationship between having medical coverage and the nature and course of their recovery? We're going to use the information from this survey to develop a web-based, primarily closed-ended survey that we're going to administer to our membership. We'll construct this survey using the response categories that reflect the way the patient population thinks about and describes their symptoms. We plan to collect more demographic information, personal medical histories, and family medical histories in the next survey. We're in a unique position of being able to do a comprehensive and longitudinal study, and we are not dependent on a funding source to engage in this work. We've done all of this work with just an incredible team of volunteers who have devoted thousands and thousands of hours to do this research, and I have to thank Jessie Danninger, who's been the biggest part of this and has donated 7 years of her life to doing this research. And I have snared her into working with me on the next portion of this. Thank you. Yeah, Kat. We didn't ask the question that specifically. Oh, Kathy asked whether or not the pain was identified at onset as opposed to, afterwards in the development of maybe neuropathic pain as opposed to during the acute onset. We did not parse it out specifically like that. And that's my thought too, that some of the pain in the young kids might have been right at onset and not afterwards, because my impression has been, just from, again, anecdotal experience, that the really young kids don't get pain. And in fact, what's really interesting is that even children who get TM into adulthood don't seem to experience pain. Like Stephen and Paula, if you got TM as a child, they don't seem to get neuropathic pain in adulthood. Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely something we need to parse out in the next survey, I think, more specifically.
Sandy, I might add to that Paul and I were just talking about this. Thank you, Doug. We know several pediatric cases that none of them have told us anything about having neuropathic pain, but all of them had talked about having back pain either the day before or during the attack.
Right.
But after that, we haven't, I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but we haven't come across it yet.
Yeah, we will be able to at least get some sense of this when we analyze the question about what were your symptoms at onset and what are your current symptoms, because it may be that they identified as an onset symptom pain and it doesn't exist in their current symptoms. So we're going to be able to look at this more closely when we analyze all of the data. Anything else? I don't know. I'm a cultural anthropologist.
You resort to that for
whenever I need to. Oh, I do that primarily during the question and answer thing.
It's a good point, though. Carlos, did you have a?
Right.
I should just tell you, I think this is spectacular. I mean, I think it's a very valuable tool. I mean, you understand that it is entirely subjective and open-ended. Obviously, that's true, but that actually makes it more powerful in some respects, exactly for the reasons that you've mentioned. There are a couple. I mean, in many respects, it's very similar to what we've found, which was a very different way of gathering information. But yet, it's amazing that the information was so similar. I, too, am surprised, for example, that there's no seasonal preponderance of this. I mean, I am absolutely anecdotally convinced that this is kind of late summer into kind of early winter. It's just, it's almost a daily thing where I get a calling, you do too. And yet, Your statistics say no, and Chitra tells me no. There's no, you know, now Peter raised a point when we heard that is, I wonder if the severity may vary by season. Not just when it comes on, but maybe those that occur, you know, late summer, early fall are more severe. Maybe that's, first of all, why we hear about it more. And that would make some sense that if you've had this antecedent infection, that you might get late summer, early fall, which is kind of the most common time for that to occur, that your transverse myelitis is more severe. So that may be a way to reconcile our experiences with the statistics that have been developed. So, other comments?
Well, the other really important thing to keep in mind about this is that the people who are being looked at in the database that the Johns Hopkins TM Center and that Chitra presented and that she's been working with over the years is that these people are included using the diagnostic criteria that were developed by Dr. Kerr, the other physicians who were involved in that project. These are, in our survey, these are people who are self-reporting, and we don't have any way to verify whether these people have transverse myelitis or bubonic plague. I mean, this, you know, they fill out the survey, they return it to us, and we accept that this is what, and that it raises the other issue about whether people are getting a correct diagnosis even when they're being told they have transverse myelitis. So there's sloppage in our survey. I think what is compelling about our survey is the magnitude of it. If you even, just if you strip off whatever sloppage is there from the fact that it's self-reported data, it's the magnitude of it, I think, that gives it some credibility.
Oh, it's 4 times larger than ours, and it's remarkable that there is so much concordance in many of the things that you showed that Chitra showed.
And the best part of this for us is that there was no follow-up with this. If I had contacted people and made them feel guilty enough to return that survey to me, which is what I'll do with the next one, we will get response rates up around 80 to 90%. I have no doubt in my mind. And so we're going to be able to collect, I think, from the next survey a lot better information than we got out of this one. And Jesse and I can't wait to start it, right, Jesse?
Right. All right. Should we go on? What do you think?
We're probably running really late.
No, we're
Are we
actually
all
only
right?
A few minutes. 10 minutes late. So let's move on. Can we hold that for later? Okay. So
Thank
Rosemary Fillard is here. She's going to talk to us about neuropathic pain. Rosemary is a physiatrist at Hopkins and is the director of spinal cord services, right? Okay.